All right, in this video, we are going to introduce the topic of molecular biology. And so we are representing a point in the semester in which we're taking a 180-degree turn. Now, the first subject that we're going to go into with regards to molecular biology is gene expression, and that's transcription and translation, but we'll talk about that later. Right now, let's represent where we were and where we are going next. So in the first 8 weeks, it was all protein centric. And you learned about the idea and the structure of amino acids, the monomers that make up proteins. Right? There were a number of different categories of amino acids, and those amino acids are put together by covalent bonds called peptide bonds to make a linear chain. Okay, and that is our polypeptide, which will then properly fold to accommodate all of the various weak interactions amongst the R groups of the amino acids. We have hydrogen bonding, we have hydrophobic interactions, there are ionic interactions, and that protein is going to fold in a very specific way. So let's take a look at the logic here. The sequence of amino acids dictates how that protein is going to fold, and so therefore the structure of that protein. Now, the structure of the protein determines its function. So for example, here is hemoglobin. It has a very specific structure, right? A structure very different than collagen here, another protein. And it's because of this structure, because it can hold on to these heme groups, that gives it its function, its ability to hold and carry oxygen. Therefore, the structure of a protein dictates its function. And don't forget that the sequence of amino acids in that protein dictate its structure. So when we put 2 and 2 together, what that means is the sequence of amino acids in a protein indirectly determines the function of that protein. Some of these proteins might play a structural role, like keratin in your hair or in the horns of this rhino. Some may play a more active role. For example, hemoglobin here that holds and transports oxygen within red blood cells. Many of the proteins that we learned of, especially within metabolism, are enzymes that catalyze reactions. For example, here's a small little biochemical pathway. When you drink ethanol, so alcohol from your beer or your wine, you need alcohol dehydrogenase. Okay, that's an enzyme that catalyzes the conversion of ethanol into acetaldehyde. And then you need acetaldehyde dehydrogenase, which converts acetaldehyde into acetate, and then that can be properly metabolized. Okay, and these two enzymes here, ADH, ALDH, these are proteins that have a specific function because they fold in a specific way, because they are made up of amino acids in a specific sequence. Okay? So what that means then is your ability, your cell's ability to do things, to have specific functions, is due to the proteins that your cell makes. Now, the type of proteins that your cell expresses might be different than that of another person. One person might have a protein, the acetaldehyde dehydrogenase protein, that works very quickly, that works properly. But another person may have inherited, may have another protein that doesn't work quite as well. So it's the same protein, the acetaldehyde dehydrogenase protein, but it's got its structure is a little bit different such that it doesn't work quite as well. So this person who has the fast version of the protein, when they consume alcohol, that acetaldehyde gets broken down into acetate very quickly. And that person has, let's say, quote, a normal response to ethanol. That is the person's phenotype, okay, with regards to this particular response to alcohol. Now, a person who has the slow protein, the protein that does not catalyze this reaction very well, when that person drinks alcohol, acetaldehyde begins to build up, but because they have the slow version of the protein, they can't break that acetaldehyde into acetate very fast, and so that acetaldehyde begins to accumulate, and that causes a specific physiological effect. That person's face might get red, they have a rapid heart rate, and there's several other symptoms that are sometimes referred to as alcohol flush. And that is the phenotype that this person has. So your phenotype, the traits that you have, are a direct result of the type of proteins that your cells make. Okay? And the difference here is, okay, what is the difference between maybe the fast version of the protein and the slower version of the protein? Sometimes it's a simple one amino acid change. So all of these letters represent the various amino acids and the order in which they occur in the protein, the acetaldehyde dehydrogenase protein. And notice these two people, they have the exact same sequence except for the fast enzyme has a T here and the slow one has an S here. And that's it. That's what distinguishes whether you will have alcohol flush or whether you won't. Just that simple amino acid change. All right, so I got a big question mark here. And the question is, if the sequence of amino acids within a protein determines its structure, therefore determines its function, therefore determines your phenotype, your traits, then the ultimate question is, what determines the sequence of amino acids within a protein? And the answer are genes. There is a gene that encodes the acetaldehyde dehydrogenase protein. Here's the protein, so all of these letters are amino acids. Here's the gene. All of these letters are nucleotides. And so the gene within your DNA, within the nucleus of each of your cells, is what determines the amino acid sequence and therefore structure and function of your proteins. And all of your genes, in all of your DNA, in all of the nuclei, in all of your cells, is referred to as your genotype. So it is your genotype that determines your phenotype. It is all of your genes that determines all of your traits. And the connection is that your genes encode proteins which fold a specific way, which therefore have a specific function. So here is a nice illustration of the making of a trait. Here we have a gene within your DNA. That gene will eventually be transcribed in very specific cells into RNA. That RNA will be translated into protein. That protein will properly fold and therefore have a specific function. Maybe it's a hormone or a transporter or structures or enzymes and such on and so forth. And the function of all of those proteins then will affect your traits, whether you have brown eyes, alcohol flush, etc., etc. Now, the first half of our class dealt with this half here. with understanding protein, amino acids, and polypeptide bonds, and how a protein folds, and the different functions of a protein, and how that can affect metabolism and traits. That is the biochemistry and cell biology portion of this course. Now, we want to know what determines whether or not a protein is going to be made within a cell. We're going to determine, right, how a protein gets made. And that all comes under these types of courses. Genetics are these fields of biology. Genetics, molecular biology. So that is what we're going to spend the second half of this course talking about.